welcome to the Musicians Weekly Volume 24. Today I will give you a phenomenological approach, an insight into why in polyphonic music, major and minor mode became absolutely dominant and all the so-called church modes were put aside at the time when modulation took over in harmony. And so, first of all, we will have a look at these so-called church modes, which are the ancient modes derived from Greek music, as far as we know, probably from Egyptian music. We don't know it. We don't know. They could not notate it in a way that we understand absolutely in a clear way how they meant it. So we have here the Dorian mode, which starts on the second note of the major mode. The Dorian mode, you can see here, it starts with a whole tone and it ends with a whole tone. And there, the second tone here and the second tone here are half tones. So that means that in the Dorian mode, there is no tone leading, no half tone leading to the tonic, and no half tone leading even to the dominant. And this is why the Dorian mode is so indecisive. It's so wonderfully free and just going around, and Ralph Vaughan Williams loved it for its characteristics, because it is not teleological at all. It doesn't want to go anywhere. And then we have the Aeolian mode, which almost looks like our minor mode, but it's not the same. Because also here you can see that there is no half tone leading to the tonic. There is only one half tone leading down to the dominant. The other half tone, it doesn't matter in this criteria. So also here we don't have a clear direction toward the dominant, toward the tonic. When we modulate, when we come from some key and go into another key, we need a clarity of direction. Before modulation, it was not necessary. Aeolian mode would work perfectly without modulation, as does Dorian mode. Now we have the Locrian mode, which is a kind of exotic thing, even in Greek music. Because as you can see here, we have the half tone going up from the tonic note, and we have the half tone from the fourth to the fifth note. So we have no dominant. And as we have no dominant, this mode was not in use normally. It was maybe used for some very depressive and very problematic and dissonant expression. But it was not a normal mode to be used. And it's very interesting because when John Fowles, the great British composer, when he did his table of Indian modes in his book Music Today in 1932, he explored all these Indian modes because his life's companion, Maud McCarthy, she had studied the Indian music. And so he wrote all these things down because before he finally went to India and died of cholera. And so there is one thing he explains. Basically, he says there is not one mode without the fifth, without the upper fifth. So this is just a Locrian mode. It doesn't have the upper fifth. It doesn't have the dominant tone. It doesn't have the main overtone of the basic note. So the Locrian mode stayed exotic. It is just something which is also there because we have these different ways of, we always have a tritone somewhere. And so we have here the tritone downward, and we have this, so it doesn't lead to a chord we can use for the tonic. So it doesn't make any sense in polyphonic music, but it also didn't really make sense in monophonic music. And then we have the Phrygian mode. This works perfectly, but I will explain to you why it's still wrong what is written here. But everything is right, academically spoken. So the Phrygian mode we have here, but it doesn't lead to the tonic in that way. It leads downward to the tonic. That's interesting. And it also leads downward to the dominant. So we can ask ourselves why it didn't become more important. Then we have the Lydian mode. And the Lydian mode, it's very obvious here. We have this half tone from the fourth to the fifth note. But this means that the fourth note from the tonic to the fourth note to the subdominant, it is an augmented triad. And this means we have here the tritone, we have the tritone. And so when we have the tritone, we cannot, I'm sorry, and it's of course in this augmented triad is wrong. We have the tritone into, so we don't have the subdominant. And when we have no subdominant, a whole region is not usable. The whole region of introversion, of introvert harmony. And so of course it was very interesting to use, and Beethoven loved it and used it in his final quartets, but he didn't omit the subdominant, so he just used it melodically, and then harmonically he had need for the subdominant. So it became something exotic. It was in use, but only melodically. And then we have the Mixolydian mode. There we have a problem a bit similar to the Dorian mode. We have no tone leading to the tonic, and of course we only have a tone leading to the subdominant. So we always feel it should end a fifth lower in the C. So the Mixolydian mode, it makes sense to some degree, but it is not very decisive. So when we have it doesn't have the power of the Ionic mode, which is the next thing I will show you. It is the normal major mode. It was the so-called Ionic. In the major mode, this is the naturally going upward mode. And it's very interesting. We have 2/5 upward, 2/5 upward, 5/5 downward, 2, 2, 2, and again 5. So we have 10/5 upward and 10/5 downward in these two steps. These two steps are what Gurdjieff would call the shock. And so we have everything there. We have the leading note to the tonic. We have the subdominant and the dominant. Everything is there, and it's naturally going upward. Large step, then small step because we need the subdominant. Large step, small step because we need the tonic again. And absolutely going upward in a very decisive way, and a very clear, finally a very clear tonic. No doubt about it at all. So what would be, if this major mode is the natural expression also of extrovert scale, of an extrovert scale. So the natural way of an introvert scale is the Phrygian, which I showed you, but it goes downward. So the academic way of showing it going upward is totally wrong. Because, as you can see here, it leads to the tonic from above, and it leads here to the dominant. Very interestingly, we have twice 2/5 downward, 5/5 upward, 3 times 2/5 downward, 5/5 upward. Again, 10/5 introvert, 10/5 extrovert is 0. Same here, and same with every scale. But what you can see here, that the Phrygian mode is the exact mirror of the major mode. So it would have been the perfect thing combined with major mode. Phrygian mode and major mode would be enough to modulate, and to modulate very clearly in the introvert and in the extrovert manner. And if the music would be just melodic and without harmony, it would work perfectly. But what is the problem? When we look here at the Phrygian mode again. So we have this halftone step here. And we have the fifth here, the dominant. So if we we have to build the chords on the main harmonies. That means on the tonic, on the dominant, and on the subdominant. So we have on the tonic, we have E, G, and B, which is a minor triad. On the subdominant, we have A, C, and E, which is another minor triad, like in the minor mode. But on the dominant, we have B, D, F. And this is a diminished chord. So it doesn't work. It has no power. It's not a dominant. So the Phrygian mode disappeared as soon. The archaic, original Phrygian mode disappeared as soon as polyphony came. So it was out of use long before modulation came into music. And so we cannot use it. It's so powerful. And the whole Oriental music is mainly built on this mode, on the Phrygian mode. So all this music from Levante, the Assyrian music, where our music derives from, the Arab music, all this is mainly built on the Phrygian mode. Of course, then there is some microtonality and all these things. So, what came out as the corresponding scale to major mode is minor mode. And here we have minor mode. And now with minor mode, always was there a problem to explain why we have this augmented step. So everything is fine, but we have this augmented step. What does it come from? There are many explanations. Felix Dreisig, for example, tried to explain it like that. He said, so it's a leading note from above to the dominant, and it's a leading note from below to the tonic. Yeah, but we have the octave. So, of course, this is a nice explanation melodically, but it's not really an explanation where minor mode comes from. So we have this archaic Phrygian mode, and we have to find something that just comes as close as possible to this, but serves the needs of polyphony. So what came out? When you have the Phrygian mode and you have, the diminished chord from B, D, F. So you need F sharp, of course. Then you have a minor chord, which is much better. But a minor chord doesn't express the need of the dominant, because the dominant is the extrovert region. So it is the upper fifth. So the upper fifth is extroversion pure. And so we need a major chord on that. That means we need not only F sharp, we also need D sharp. Then we have B, D sharp, F sharp. And then we have the minor mode. So we have a Phrygian mode, archaic Phrygian mode. Everything wants to go downward, but this main step here in the beginning, which leads downward, it goes now upward. So now it's an upward scale with all the characteristics of the Phrygian, apart from two notes that are a hybrid dominant implanted into the Phrygian mode. And I show you here. Here we have the tonic minor chord, E, G, B. Very clear. The subdominant minor chord, A, C, E. And now we have either B, D, and F, the diminished chord, or alterated B to D to D sharp and F to F sharp. Then we have B, D sharp and F sharp, and we have a dominant, a major chord. Here you see it again. Dominant and the Phrygian fifth, which is a diminished chord. So it's very simple. Of course, you can say, no, it's Aeolian just with one alteration. But Aeolian doesn't have these characteristics of the Phrygian. It was one of these modes just without a clear direction. Phrygian always had the direction. Now the direction is turned into the other direction. It doesn't come from above, it comes from below. But apart from that, it's just the basic characteristics of the archaic Phrygian. So I hope you understand this. And this is a real explanation how the minor mode made its triumphant way through all the music of the Baroque, of the classical period, of the Romantic period, and even of the early Modernist period. And so this is something which is normally with a lot of complicated ideas. Of course, we have other ways of varying this. It means we have, this is what I speak is harmonic minor mode. Now there is a so-called melodic minor mode. So we have if we go downward, it's just Aeolian. But when we go upward, this is melodically, of course, it can work, but harmonically it will very often not work. So it's just an elegant way of avoiding the augmented step. And then you have the so-called Tzigane minor. Then we have this dominant is with a half tone from above and a half tone from below. So it strengthens the dominant function in a melodically powerful way, but of course it takes away the subdominant. So for melody, it's very useful, and for as an expressive device, fantastic. But of course, then you need the subdominant again. So it's not a basic scale. It is just a scale that can work for particular expression. So now you know where minor mode comes from and what it is originally. And then you can also understand that these composers, like Johannes Brahms, like Gabriel Fauré, like Jean Sibelius, they were always searching for the original Phrygian mode. It doesn't work in polyphony. It only works as a half end. That means ending on the dominant in the Bach chorals and so on. Then you have this. And when you end on the dominant, but then you feel, I should go down a step. So this you don't feel to go down one more fifth. This you don't feel in the original Phrygian. So this hybrid chord, which makes the dominant into the Phrygian, this is what minor mode is. And it is what we needed as the introvert opposite of the extrovert major mode. All the best.